Just vividly imagine exactly this. You are a ruthless, untouchable billionaire, CEO. 5 years ago, you threw your pregnant wife out onto the streets, convinced by undeniable evidence that she cheated on you, stole millions, and aborted your child. You erased her from your life. But today, a random rainstorm forces you into a run-down, dingy coffee shop. You look up to order, and your heart completely, violently stops. Standing behind the counter, wearing a faded, flour-stained apron, is the woman you once loved. She didn't steal your millions. She is working for minimum wage. But the most terrifying, earth-shattering shock isn't her. It's the 2 4-year-old boys clinging to her legs. Little boys who look up at you with your exact, unmistakable, genetically rare, icy blue eyes. What would you do when you realize you destroyed your own family over a catastrophic, malicious lie? Strap in, because this story of betrayal, revenge, and redemption will absolutely rip your soul inside out. Welcome back, my beautiful family. If you fiercely believe that the truth always comes to light, and that ultimate karma never misses its target, you absolutely must hear this masterpiece. Smash that like button, subscribe to our channel with notifications on, and let me know in the comments. Do you believe a man can truly change for the sake of his child? Read until the very end, because this explosive finale will leave you breathless. Let's begin. Part 1. The ghost in the coffee shop. The little bell above the cafe door chimed. The sound was so aggressively mundane that Harrison Yates barely even noticed it. He was a massive man, intimately accustomed to the isolated, soundproof silence of corner executive offices and chauffeured Maybachs. But a sudden, violent New York downpour had driven him into this cramped, cinnamon-smelling coffee shop to impatiently wait for his driver. He sharply shook the cold rain from his bespoke, $5,000 Italian suit, looked up to order a meaningless espresso, and the breath was violently, forcefully knocked completely out of his lungs. Right there was Ella, the wife who had supposedly betrayed him, shattered his fragile heart, and vanished 5 years ago with a massive, multi-million-dollar settlement. But the absolute true shock wasn't the tired little wrinkles around her beautiful, familiar face, or the faded, stained apron she flawlessly wore. It was the 2 4-year-old boys clinging tightly to her legs behind the counter. Innocent boys who smoothly turned and looked directly at him with the completely unmistakable, piercing icy blue eyes of the Yates bloodline. Harrison Yates absolutely did not believe in fate. He fiercely believed in leverage, hostile takeovers, and ironclad contracts. At exactly 34 years old, he was the ruthless CEO of Yates Omnicorp, a massive real estate and tech conglomerate that practically owned the Manhattan skyline. His beautiful life was a highly meticulously calibrated spreadsheet, completely devoid of unpredictable variables. He ruthlessly, surgically cut out absolutely anything and anyone who threatened his absolute control. 5 agonizing years ago, that included his wife. Memories of Ella were usually securely locked inside a mental vault, deeply buried under layers of corporate strategy and meaningless dates at high society galas. But today, the universe had highly maliciously decided to violently blow that heavy vault wide open. It all started with a blown tire on the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. His elite driver, Thomas, was profusely apologizing while guiding the crippled luxury sedan to the shoulder, right exactly when the dark sky split open in a blinding, torrential downpour. Stranded in a poor neighborhood Harrison usually only ever saw from his private helicopter, he violently ran into the nearest shelter, a dilapidated, brick-faced establishment called Roasted Bean. The heavy air inside was incredibly thick, with the smell of roasted Arabica, burnt milk, and wet wool from the handful of locals escaping the fierce storm. Harrison stood by the door, shaking water from his $3,000 cashmere coat, his sharp jaws tightly clenched with pure irritation. He confidently approached the counter, pulling out his expensive phone to check emails, without even glancing at the barista. "What can I highly happily get for you?" a soft voice asked. Harrison completely, violently froze. The expensive phone miraculously almost slipped completely out of his damp fingers. It was exactly that specific voice he had heard in his agonizing dreams for years, before he finally learned to drink himself into a dreamless, deep sleep. Soft, with a slightly breathy intonation, he incredibly slowly raised his handsome head. His massive heart suddenly violently beat in a fierce, frantic rhythm against his ribs. Ella. She was wiping down the espresso machine, standing half-turned away from him. Her beautiful chestnut hair, which once cascaded down her back in perfectly styled waves, was now gathered in a messy utilitarian bun, secured by a cheap plastic clip. She wore a faded green apron covered in flour dust and coffee stains over a simple black t-shirt. She looked completely exhausted. Dark circles lay heavily under her piercing eyes, and her fragile shoulders carried a heavy, invisible weight. But it was undeniably her. The beautiful woman who, according to his arrogant mother and his elite lawyers, had spun toxic affairs, forged his signature on company documents, and demanded a massive $15 million payout to leave the marriage and abort their child. Harrison absolutely could not actively breathe. A highly potent, explosive cocktail of pure rage, deep betrayal, and a sickening, undeniable magnetic pull flooded his veins. He smoothly opened his mouth to actively speak, to highly aggressively demand a logical answer as to what the absolute hell she was doing serving cheap coffee when she had $15 million of his money stashed in offshore accounts. But completely before he could formulate the heavy words, a tiny, high-pitched voice shattered the massive tension. "Mama, Leo doesn't want to highly happily share the red crayon." The piercing gaze of Harrison violently darted completely down. From behind the swinging door leading to the back room, exactly two tiny little boys confidently appeared. They were completely, 100% identical. They absolutely couldn't be older than 4 young years. They wore faded denim overalls and slightly scuffed cheap sneakers. "Alex, my sweet buddy, I highly honestly told you that you need to draw in turns," Ella said, and her absolute entire demeanor instantly, miraculously softened. The massive exhaustion completely melted from her beautiful face, replaced by a radiant, all-consuming, pure love, as she gracefully sank onto her knees behind the counter to gently wipe a smudge of chocolate from the boy's soft cheek. Harrison safely remained standing, completely paralyzed. The innocent boy named Alex slowly looked completely up. His intense attention was caught by the tall, imposing massive man staring directly at them. The entire massive world completely, violently flipped upside down. The young boy absolutely did not possess the warm, beautiful brown eyes of Ella. He possessed the piercing eyes of Harrison. And not just simple blue eyes. They possessed exactly that highly specific, piercing, icy blue shade with a dark slate ring completely around the iris. It was officially a rare genetic anomaly that had been passed down through the male line of the Yates family for exactly 4 generations. The absolute other innocent boy, Leo, peeked out from behind his loving mother's leg, sporting the exact same specific piercing eyes and the highly exact same stubborn cowlick at the front of his dark hair that Harrison fought with expensive gel absolutely every single bright morning. Twins, his biological twins. The highly explosive realization violently struck with the massive force of a freight train. She absolutely did not terminate the beautiful pregnancy. The highly secure medical documents that his elite lawyer had shown him, the exact same ones that had finally, completely broken his fragile spirit and forced him to sign the divorce papers without even looking at her, absolutely were a highly toxic lie. Or was exactly this some kind of highly sophisticated long-term scam? "Sir, are you completely ready to order?" Ella stood completely up, finally shifting her absolute entire intense attention completely to him. Their piercing eyes completely, violently met. The wet rag slipped completely from her soft hand with a wet slap, hitting the cheap linoleum. Absolutely all the bright color completely drained from her beautiful face, leaving her pale as white porcelain. She loudly gasped and highly instinctively, confidently, took exactly one massive step completely back, violently throwing her fragile arms out to push the twins significantly further behind her weak legs. A fiercely protective, miraculously almost terrified gesture. "Harrison," she whispered incredibly softly. Her beautiful voice violently trembled. In it, there was absolutely zero toxic guilt. Absolutely only pure, unadulterated fear. In the brilliant head of Harrison violently raged a chaotic storm. He intensely looked from her terrified face to the innocent boys, who stared at him with wide, innocent eyes. The heavy air in the cheap cafe felt way too incredibly thin. He was an absolute master of fierce confrontation in the corporate boardroom. But perfectly right here, under the flickering fluorescent lights of a rundown coffee shop, he was completely, utterly defenseless. He didn't violently scream. He didn't highly aggressively demand answers. The massive shock was way too incredibly deep. The highly explosive consequences way too massive. He highly simply smoothly turned around, violently pushed the heavy glass door, and confidently walked completely back out into the blinding rain, leaving a stunned, dead silence completely behind him. Interactive question. Harrison just realized his ex-wife is raising his twin sons in poverty. What do you think he will do next? Drop your fierce predictions below. Part 2. The 48 Hours of Hell. Harrison absolutely did not safely return to the massive office. He highly strictly ordered Thomas to drive him straight to his luxury penthouse overlooking the Hudson River. He locked himself in his private study and poured himself a heavy glass of expensive Macallan 25. He absolutely didn't drink it. He just intensely stared at the amber liquid, while the highly beautiful image of those two little boys burned into his retinas, Leo and Alex. He confidently grabbed his expensive phone and rapidly dialed a highly secure number he hadn't actively used in 3 agonizing years. "Ronan," Harrison stated as soon as the connection was established. "I highly desperately need you in my private office, completely immediately. Drop absolutely everything you are doing." Ronan Cross was officially the absolute best private investigator on the East Coast. A former intelligence officer with a terrifying ability to dig up buried secrets, he was the only genuine man Harrison completely trusted outside his immediate corporate circle. In less than exactly 1 short hour, Ronan safely sat opposite Harrison's mahogany desk, his notepad open. Harrison recounted the highly explosive events in the cafe with cold, clinical detachment, even though his strong hands slightly violently trembled. "I highly desperately need to explicitly know absolutely everything," Harrison ordered with a highly tense, deep voice. "I desperately need her highly secure bank statements. I desperately need her highly detailed residential history. I desperately need the highly official birth certificates of exactly these innocent boys. I highly desperately need to know exactly why a beautiful woman with $15 million of my massive money is brutally working for minimum wage and peacefully living in highly absolute terrifying fear of me. Consider exactly it completely done," Ronan stated with a highly serious expression. Highly generously give me exactly 48 agonizing hours. Those exactly 48 hours absolutely were pure, unadulterated hell. Harrison miraculously, almost absolutely didn't sleep. He highly frantically paced his luxury apartment, violently tormented by highly painful memories of their bitter, catastrophic end. He highly agonizingly remembered the explosive scandal with mutual screaming in exactly this very room. He had literally just been handed a massive dossier by his highly arrogant mother, Victoria Yates, and his chief legal counsel, Silas Vance. In the dossier were highly clear photographs of Ella entering an expensive hotel with another massive man. In it were highly secure bank transfers showing she was violently siphoning massive funds from their joint accounts. And the absolute most highly destructive, in it was a highly official medical certificate confirming she had terminated the beautiful pregnancy. The exact same pregnancy they had so incredibly desperately fought for. The innocent child Harrison had so desperately wanted. When he confronted her, she was highly hysterical. She completely denied absolutely everything, violently cried, and pathetically begged him to highly blindly believe her. But the undeniable evidence was perfectly right in front of him. Silas Vance confidently stood nearby, shaking his handsome head with fake sympathy, while Victoria maliciously smirked, calling Ella a street rat who had finally shown her true colors. Harrison ruthlessly threw her out. He highly coldly, explicitly told her she was completely dead to him. He instructed Silas to draft the most severe divorce agreement possible, throwing a lump sum of $15 million at her just so she would completely disappear forever, demanding she sign an ironclad NDA that strictly forbade her from absolutely ever contacting him again. On the bright morning of the exactly third day, Ronan Cross safely returned. He absolutely didn't look highly triumphant. He looked profoundly, deeply troubled. He heavily placed a highly thick yellow folder perfectly on Harrison's polished desk. "Harrison," Ronan began incredibly cautiously, "you highly desperately need to brace completely yourself. Absolutely nothing of what you honestly told me about your highly toxic divorce matches the highly absolute reality of the last 5 agonizing years." Harrison highly confusedly frowned, opening the folder. "What exactly the absolute hell are you actively talking about?" "Let's highly bravely start with the massive money," Ronan stated, pointing directly at the first page. Ella absolutely never, ever received the $15 million. In highly absolute fact, she completely received absolutely not a single cheap penny. Harrison's head snapped completely up. "Exactly, this is completely impossible. I highly personally authorized the massive bank transfer. I vividly saw the highly official receipt." "You vividly saw a highly official receipt for a bank transfer to an offshore shell account in the Cayman Islands," Ronan sharply corrected. "I highly meticulously tracked exactly that secure account. It is completely hidden behind exactly 3 dummy shell companies, but I highly successfully managed to pierce the corporate veil. The highly ultimate, true beneficiary of exactly that offshore account is absolutely not Ella. It is officially Silas Vance." The highly dead silence in the massive room was completely deafening. Harrison intensely stared at the private detective. The heavy words violently echoed in his brilliant mind. Silas, his highly elite lawyer, his supposed loyal friend. "Aggressively continue," Harrison exhaled. His dry throat had suddenly become incredibly parched. "Ella confidently left your luxury penthouse exactly that dark night, with literally exactly 1 single cheap suitcase," Ronan continued, smoothly turning the pages. "The absolute first 3 agonizing months, she peacefully lived in a highly run-down women's shelter in Queens, took on highly exhausting jobs, cleaning houses, and working as a cheap waitress. Exactly 7 agonizing months after you ruthlessly kicked her out, she highly painfully gave magical birth to the twins. The highly massive medical bills drove her into enormous, crushing debt. Since exactly then, she has been brutally working 2 highly exhausting jobs just to affordably feed them and pay the cheap rent for a cramped walk-up apartment in an industrial zone. Harrison felt highly physically sick, the sharp edges of his vision completely blurred. The highly official birth certificates. Ronan slid a photocopy completely across the desk. Leo and Alex. The precise dates of birth flawlessly match her beautiful pregnancy exactly when you were happily married. In the highly strict column for father, there is a highly blank dash. She highly officially listed him as completely unknown. Harrison took the official paper. His strong fingers slowly traced over the beautiful names. His biological sons. They were miraculously born in a highly underfunded charity hospital entirely, while he was highly happily drinking vintage champagne at elite corporate receptions, highly maliciously cursing their loving mother's name. Perfectly, there is absolutely still significantly more, Ronan stated, lowering his deep voice. I dug deeply into the highly toxic dossier that triggered the divorce. The highly clear photographs of her in the expensive hotel. Deepfakes. Highly high quality, but the highly malicious forgery is completely obvious if you know exactly where to look. The highly secure bank transfers. Highly illegally authorized from a terminal completely inside Yates Omnicorp, using a highly cloned IP address. And the highly official medical certificate about the abortion. Ronan heavily sighed. A highly complete forgery. She was highly diligently going to her obstetrician for regular prenatal care. I actively spoke with the clinic workers. They intimately remember her. They intimately remember that she was completely, utterly heartbroken because her arrogant husband had highly ruthlessly abandoned her. Harrison violently jumped completely up so incredibly fast that his heavy leather executive chair crashed completely backward onto the hard floor. He absolutely could not actively breathe. The highly massive betrayal was so incredibly enormous, so incredibly profound, that it highly actively seemed as if the hard floor had split completely open to violently swallow him. He wasn't just maliciously lied to. He was highly toxically manipulated into completely, violently destroying his absolute own beautiful family. And the highly brilliant architects of his immense suffering were the genuine people he highly blindly trusted the absolute most. My elite lawyer and my highly arrogant mother, Harrison whispered, the crushing realization striking him exactly like a physical blow. Victoria. She had highly absolutely hated Ella completely from the absolute first day. Highly toxically considered her a pathetic commoner, way too incredibly poor for the prestigious Yates legacy. I absolutely haven't found highly direct financial ties to Victoria Yates yet, Ronan warned. But Silas Vance would absolutely never have possessed the pure audacity to pull off a $15 million scam and violently destroy your marriage without highly absolute cover from the very top. Your highly arrogant mother is the absolute only genuine person who highly successfully possesses the pure power to highly aggressively protect him. Harrison confidently walked directly to the breathtaking panoramic window, intensely looking down at the massive city he practically owned. He highly successfully possessed absolutely everything, but the absolute only highly genuine thing that truly mattered had been highly maliciously stolen completely from him, and he himself had highly cowardly helped the ruthless thieves pack their bags. Where exactly officially is she right exactly now? Harrison asked with a murderously, terrifyingly quiet, deep voice. It absolutely was not the voice of a completely broken man. It was the voice of a highly lethal predator who had literally just profoundly realized exactly who his highly pathetic prey officially was. "Today is highly anticipated Saturday," Ronan stated, glancing at his expensive watch. "She highly usually safely takes the innocent boys to Brooklyn Bridge Park on her absolute only highly precious afternoon off." Harrison smoothly turned around. "I highly desperately need you to completely freeze absolutely all secure accounts, highly connected completely to Silas Vance. Do exactly it highly quietly. Bring in your absolute best forensic financial investigators. I highly fiercely want him to absolutely be completely, violently destroyed. Highly, legally and highly financially, absolutely even completely. Before he highly astutely realizes exactly that he has absolutely been violently attacked. And exactly what absolutely will you actively do?" Ronan asked. Harrison confidently walked past him, highly aggressively grabbing his expensive coat. "I am actively going entirely to highly proudly meet my biological sons, and I am actively going entirely to highly pathetically beg my highly devoted wife entirely to highly generously spare my miserable life." Interactive question. Harrison finally knows the truth. His mother and best friend destroyed his life. What is the ultimate punishment for them? Drop your fierce theories below. Part 3. The Begging Billionaire. Brooklyn Bridge Park was highly beautifully bathed in the golden, hazy light of the late Saturday afternoon. The crisp air was completely filled with the highly distant sounds of city traffic and the immediate, chaotic, pure joy of highly energetic playing children. Harrison quietly parked his expensive car exactly 2 blocks away. He absolutely didn't want Thomas, or absolutely anyone else, to be a highly silent witness to exactly this. He confidently walked toward the highly fun playground. His massive heart was violently pounding against his fragile ribs with a highly massive force he hadn't profoundly felt since his insecure adolescence. He profoundly felt completely, 100% out of his element. He absolutely wasn't flawlessly wearing a bespoke suit. He had highly carefully changed into dark jeans and a highly simple gray sweater, highly frantically attempting to visually look significantly less highly intimidating. But his highly tense posture completely betrayed him. He highly astutely spotted them miraculously almost immediately. Ella safely sat on a highly faded wooden bench right next to the massive sandbox. In the golden autumn light, she visually looked breathtakingly, stunningly beautiful, warmly dressed in a thick, chunky cardigan. But the highly massive tension in her posture was completely palpable. Her piercing eyes, highly constantly, vigilantly darted across the busy park, highly alert and fiercely protective. In the massive sandbox, Leo and Alex were highly energetically busy, highly miraculously building a massive, structurally highly unsound sandcastle. They loudly laughed, highly happily throwing handfuls of sand, completely, 100% oblivious to the highly heavy, complex world of massive adults. Harrison took a massive, incredibly deep breath, highly bravely fighting a sudden severe bout of nausea, and aggressively forced his weak legs to confidently move completely forward. At his highly quiet approach, Ella slowly looked completely up. The highly soft, beautiful smile, with which she had been highly lovingly watching her biological sons instantly, violently vanished. She completely, violently jumped to her feet, dropping the cheap thermos she was holding. It highly loudly clattered against the hard asphalt, spilling lukewarm tea. "Boys," she stated incredibly sharply and highly urgently, "confidently come right perfectly here, completely immediately." Leo and Alex, highly astutely sensing the highly sudden, terrifying change in the beautiful tone of their loving mother, scrambled completely out of the massive sandbox, and violently ran to her, highly fearfully hiding behind her weak legs, exactly the same way they did in the cafe. Harrison completely stopped exactly 3 short meters, completely away from them. He incredibly slowly, smoothly raised his strong hands, palms facing completely outward. A highly universal gesture of absolute surrender. "Ella," he whispered incredibly softly, "please, I am absolutely not perfectly here, entirely, to highly maliciously hurt you. Highly confidently, keep completely, infinitely, far, completely, away, completely from us," she violently hissed. Her beautiful voice violently trembled from a highly explosive mixture of pure rage and absolute terror. She confidently took exactly 1 massive step, completely back, fiercely shielding the innocent boys. "I am completely serious, Harrison. I absolutely will loudly scream. I absolutely will highly urgently call the highly elite police. You successfully possess absolutely 0 highly legal right, entirely, to absolutely be perfectly here." "I completely know," Harrison stated, and his deep voice completely, violently broke. For the absolute first time in exactly 5 agonizing years, his voice broke. "I completely know exactly that I absolutely do not successfully possess exactly it. But I highly desperately need entirely to actively talk completely with you. Please." She loudly emitted a highly sharp, bitter chuckle, completely devoid of absolutely any pure joy. "To us perfectly there, absolutely is nothing entirely about exactly which entirely to actively talk. You highly clearly, explicitly explained absolutely everything exactly 5 agonizing years, completely ago, exactly when you highly ruthlessly threw me completely out onto the highly cold street. You highly fiercely wanted exactly so exactly that we would completely violently disappear. We completely disappeared, highly generously leave us completely alone." Harrison took a highly hesitant, massive step completely forward. "Ella, please, I absolutely did not completely know." He helplessly, highly pathetically pointed directly at the innocent twins, who were intensely peeking at him with wide, curious, piercing eyes. "I absolutely did not completely know entirely about them." The beautiful face of Ella completely, violently twisted with highly profound disbelief and pure indignation. "You absolutely did not completely know? You are completely 100% insane. You intensely looked completely straight directly into my piercing eyes and highly toxically told me exactly that our biological child was officially a highly pathetic parasite. That you absolutely were incredibly glad exactly that I completely got rid of exactly it. You highly toxically told me exactly that I am officially a highly pathetic gold digger, and exactly that I completely, utterly disgust you." The heavy words physically felt exactly like highly brutal physical blows. Harrison violently flinched exactly as the highly painful memories of exactly that highly dark night completely overwhelmed him. He had explicitly said exactly those highly toxic things. He was so incredibly, highly blinded by the highly fake evidence, so completely consumed by the excruciating agony of what he highly toxically believed was her highly massive betrayal, that he highly fiercely wanted to highly maliciously hurt her, exactly as incredibly deeply, exactly as he was highly brutally hurt himself. "I highly genuinely thought exactly that you highly tragically terminated the beautiful pregnancy, Ella," Harrison pathetically begged, and hot tears finally completely, violently welled in his piercing eyes. Silas highly proudly showed me the highly secure medical records. He highly proudly showed me highly clear photographs, exactly where you absolutely were, with absolutely another massive man. He highly proudly showed me highly secure bank transfers. I highly genuinely thought exactly that you completely robbed me and highly ruthlessly killed our biological child. Ella intensely stared directly at him, her fragile chest highly heavily heaving. The highly sheer absurdity of his heavy words highly actively seemed entirely to momentarily completely paralyze her. What? What exactly the absolute hell are you actively talking about? Highly secure medical records? Highly clear photographs? Harrison, I absolutely was heavily pregnant. I highly honestly, explicitly told you exactly that I'm heavily pregnant, and you highly toxically told me exactly that I'm highly maliciously lying, entirely to highly pathetically keep you. You explicitly said exactly that you're highly elite lawyers, highly successfully possessed, highly undeniable evidence, exactly that I slept with completely others, and you highly ruthlessly kicked me completely out with absolutely nothing completely, except entirely for my highly cheap clothes. But the highly massive settlement, highly stubbornly insisted Harrison, pure desperation violently seeping into his deep tone. I highly officially signed the highly strict agreement entirely for a highly massive payout of $15 million. I highly genuinely thought exactly that you highly happily took the massive money and frantically fled. I highly genuinely thought exactly that you peacefully lived entirely in highly exorbitant luxury. Money? Violently screamed Ella. Absolutely no longer. Highly toxically caring entirely about exactly who in the massive park intensely looked completely directly at them. What exactly massive money? Silas Vance confidently came directly to the highly run-down women's shelter exactly one agonizing week completely after you highly ruthlessly kicked me completely out. He highly aggressively shoved highly complex papers directly into my soft hands and explicitly said exactly that. Exactly. If I absolutely do not highly obediently sign them, completely renouncing completely from absolutely all highly legal rights perfectly to your highly massive assets, you absolutely will highly maliciously drag me completely through highly strict courts, highly aggressively prove exactly that I am officially a highly unfit, pathetic mother, and highly ruthlessly take completely away the innocent child exactly as incredibly soon, exactly as he highly magically is born. He highly toxically explicitly told me exactly that you highly absolutely hate me and absolutely never, ever highly fiercely want to vividly see my beautiful face completely, ever again. I highly obediently signed exactly them entirely because I was completely, violently terrified, completely to highly tragic death, entirely, of you, Harrison. I highly obediently signed exactly them entirely to highly aggressively protect my highly innocent babies. The absolute last highly shattered pieces of the highly terrifying puzzle completely, flawlessly, fell directly into highly perfect place with a highly sickening, terrifying clarity. Harrison heavily dropped completely onto his strong knees. Right perfectly there, completely in the highly dirty mud, completely ruining his highly expensive clothes. He completely, violently collapsed. The highly crushing realization of exactly what they had highly maliciously done to them. The highly virtuosic, pure evil manipulation completely orchestrated by his absolute own highly elite lawyer and his absolute own highly arrogant mother was way too incredibly heavy, entirely, to highly possibly bear. He highly desperately hid his handsome face completely in his strong palms. His broad shoulders violently shook from highly silent, excruciating sobs. He had completely, violently lost exactly 5 agonizing years entirely of his beautiful life. He had completely, violently lost the absolute only pure love entirely of his entire massive life. He had completely, violently missed the highly magical birth entirely of his biological sons, their absolute first highly wobbly steps, their absolute first highly precious words, and absolutely all, exactly this entirely, because he was way too incredibly blind, way too incredibly arrogant, and highly blindly trusted the completely 100% wrong elite people. Harrison, the beautiful voice of Ella, exactly now sounded incredibly hesitant. The highly pure rage completely subsided, flawlessly replaced completely by highly massive confusion and a highly dawning, terrifying realization. She intensely looked directly at the highly powerful, untouchable billionaire, highly pathetically crying entirely in the highly dirty mud, perfectly at her weak feet, incredibly slowly, completely from perfectly behind the weak legs of Ella, confidently stepped a highly tiny little figure. It was officially Leo. He highly cautiously approached directly to Harrison. Ella highly frantically reached entirely to highly aggressively stop him, but her soft hand violently hovered entirely in the heavy air, completely paralyzed by the highly sheer surrealism of absolutely everything highly actively happening. Leo completely stopped perfectly in front of Harrison, highly smoothly extended his highly tiny, chubby little hand, and highly awkwardly patted Harrison perfectly on the beautiful head. "Absolutely do not violently cry, massive uncle," Leo stated with a highly soft, high-pitched, innocent voice. "You highly painfully scratched your fragile knee." Harrison incredibly slowly lifted his handsome head. Completely through hot tears, he intensely looked completely directly into a highly flawless miniature mirror of his absolute own handsome face. He highly smoothly extended his strong hand, which violently shook incredibly strongly, and highly tenderly stroked his biological son perfectly on the highly soft cheek. The innocent boy absolutely didn't highly fearfully pull completely away. He highly simply intensely looked completely back with exactly those highly deep, icy blue Yates eyes. "No, my beautiful buddy." Harrison squeezed completely out of completely himself, highly aggressively forcing completely himself entirely to highly brokenly smile. I highly tragically lost absolutely something incredibly, highly important, a highly incredibly long massive time, completely ago, and literally just highly shockingly found exactly it." He intensely looked completely directly at Ella. Exactly now she absolutely also violently cried, highly desperately covering her soft mouth completely with her soft hand, as the highly terrifying absolute truth of the absolute last exactly 5 agonizing years completely washed completely over. Absolutely, both entirely of them. "Ella," Harrison solemnly swore, and his deep voice completely suddenly, violently hardened exactly like freezing cold steel, exactly as he highly abruptly wiped the hot tears completely from his handsome face. "I absolutely will highly miraculously fix exactly this. I absolutely will completely, violently tear the beautiful life entirely of Silas Vance completely to highly tiny pieces, and the beautiful life entirely of my highly arrogant mother. He violently paused, highly pure rage, violently radiating completely from him, exactly like intense heat. They highly ruthlessly stole our beautiful life, but they absolutely will not highly maliciously steal absolutely even exactly one single igniting second significantly more. Ella intensely looked completely directly at him. Blinding fear, absolutely, still highly quietly lurked entirely in her piercing eyes, but exactly, it highly flawlessly mixed completely with a highly tiny, fragile spark entirely of highly pure hope, completely. Before she could highly possibly successfully answer, a highly elegant pitch-black executive car smoothly pulled directly to the highly busy curb, completely closest directly to the highly grand entrance entirely of the massive park. The highly tinted glass, exactly, half smoothly, rolled completely down. In Harrison, the hot blood completely, violently, turned completely into freezing ice. He highly flawlessly recognized the highly expensive car. He highly flawlessly recognized the highly elite license plate. In the highly luxurious back seat, exactly half entirely in highly dark shadow, but completely 100% unmistakable, safely sat Victoria Yates. And she intensely looked completely straight, directly at Ella and the highly innocent twins. The highly terrifying sight of exactly that highly sleek, pitch-black Maybach idling. Exactly like a highly lethal predator, perfectly on the highly sharp edge entirely of the massive park, completely, violently shattered the highly fragile, emotionally charged safe bubble directly into exactly which he and Ella had literally just confidently entered. "Ella," Harrison stated, and his deep voice completely, violently, dropped directly onto exactly one highly low octave, highly smoothly transitioning completely into the highly strict, commanding tone, exactly which he highly professionally used. Exactly when, perfectly on the highly fragile line, confidently stood highly massive millions of dollars and highly massive corporate futures. Absolutely do not actively look perfectly onto the highly busy street. Highly safely grab the innocent boys right exactly now. Ella rapidly blinked, absolutely still, highly frantically wiping hot tears completely from her highly flushed cheeks, completely disoriented by his highly sudden, violent shift in behavior. "What, Harrison? What exactly officially is exactly it?" "My highly arrogant mother is officially entirely in exactly that highly expensive car," he stated, confidently stepping completely aside entirely to completely 100% shield completely with his highly broad, massive back, Ella completely from the highly busy street. She highly intently watches completely after us. A highly brand new wave entirely of highly pure terror violently ran completely across the beautiful face entirely of Ella. She absolutely did not violently hesitate. She highly aggressively grabbed Alex completely by the soft hand and highly violently scooped completely up the highly loudly protesting Leo directly onto her soft arms. Exactly 5 agonizing years entirely of highly frantic running, highly constantly looking completely over her fragile shoulder, had highly flawlessly honed her highly pure maternal instincts completely to a highly sharp, razor-like protective reaction. "Highly safely take my highly secure keys," Harrison strictly instructed, highly firmly pressing the highly heavy key fob completely from his highly inconspicuous, fast Audi RS6 directly into her violently trembling soft palm. It is highly safely parked exactly 2 quiet blocks, completely from perfectly here. Confidently drive completely straight, directly to the Plaza Hotel. Confidently approach directly to the highly elite reception, and highly specifically ask entirely for Vladimir Gusev. He is officially the highly elite general manager and my highly loyal personal friend. Highly honestly, explicitly, tell him exactly that you highly desperately need the highly exclusive presidential suite, completely on the highly massive corporate account entirely of Yates. He absolutely will not highly annoyingly ask highly complex questions. Highly safely, wait entirely for me, perfectly there. Harrison, I absolutely cannot highly. Simply, highly casually take your highly expensive car and confidently drive directly to a highly luxurious, massive hotel. Ella, highly intently, listen completely to me, violently interrupted Harrison. His piercing icy blue eyes completely, violently, dug completely into her piercing eyes completely, with highly, fierce, desperate intensity. Victoria literally just completely, profoundly realized exactly that you absolutely did not completely, violently disappear. She literally just completely, profoundly realized exactly that exactly. 2 biological heirs are highly energetically running completely across a highly public park. I honestly do not completely know exactly onto what she or Silas are highly terrifyingly capable, but I completely know exactly what they have absolutely already highly catastrophically done. Baby girl, please, highly generously permit me entirely to highly aggressively protect you exactly on exactly this highly specific time. Ella intensely looked completely directly at the highly imposing, massive man, perfectly right, perfectly in front, entirely of her. Then completely down directly at the highly secure keys. And, finally, completely directly at the innocent boys, who intensely looked completely directly at them, completely, with highly wide open, bewildered, piercing eyes. She gave exactly one highly tense, firm nod. Highly tightly clutching the highly innocent twins, completely herself. She smoothly turned and highly rapidly hurried completely away, completely along the highly winding park path, completely, violently, disappearing completely behind a highly thick grove, entirely of highly old oak trees. Harrison highly patiently waited completely until he was completely 100% convinced exactly that they completely hid, completely out entirely of highly clear vision. Then he highly smoothly shifted his highly intense attention completely to the highly quietly idling Maybach. He absolutely did not confidently walk. He confidently headed directly toward exactly it completely with a highly predatory, stealthy stride. When he confidently approached significantly closer, the highly tinted rear passenger window smoothly rolled completely down to the highly absolute end, completely, with a highly quiet hum. Victoria Yates safely sat entirely in the highly plush, expensive leather interior, highly proudly presenting completely by completely herself a highly terrifying picture, entirely, of highly chilling, aristocratic elegance. She flawlessly wore a highly bespoke Chanel suit. Her highly distinguished silver hair was highly impeccably perfectly styled. A highly expensive strand, entirely of highly flawless South Sea pearls, beautifully rested perfectly on her fragile collarbones. She intensely looked completely directly at Harrison, completely with a highly complex expression, entirely of highly slight, detached amusement. "Highly beautiful good afternoon, Harrison," stated Victoria completely, with a highly smooth, beautiful voice. Completely. 100% devoid, entirely of absolutely any highly pure maternal warmth. Highly leisurely strolling completely across highly public places. Exactly how incredibly bohemian completely from your highly elite side. Harrison highly violently clutched the highly sharp edge entirely of the highly expensive window frame. His delicate knuckles went completely, violently white. "What exactly are you highly actively doing perfectly here, Mother?" "I highly routinely checked exactly one highly lucrative investment," she smoothly replied. Her piercing gaze highly casually slid directly to the highly thick trees, exactly where Ella had completely disappeared. Or, highly rather, exactly one highly annoying unfinished question. Silas highly officially informed me exactly that Ronan Cross actively made highly suspicious inquiries, entirely in highly certain, specific, highly questionable local banks. I highly logically assumed exactly that you highly tragically caught the highly pathetic scent entirely of highly toxic nostalgia. "Nostalgia?" loudly scoffed Harrison. "And completely from absolutely only the highly pure audacity entirely of exactly this beautiful woman in him, completely, violently cramped the fragile stomach. Exactly so. You highly toxically call the highly malicious forgery entirely of highly secure medical documents, entirely to highly maliciously force me entirely to highly genuinely think exactly that my highly devoted wife highly ruthlessly killed our biological child. Exactly so you highly toxically call the highly complex orchestration entirely of a highly massive scheme, entirely of highly illegal embezzlement, entirely of $15 million, entirely to highly maliciously frame her?" Victoria loudly emitted a highly delicate, perfectly practiced sigh. She highly meticulously adjusted her highly expensive diamond-encrusted Patek Philippe watch. "Ah, my beautiful darling, absolutely do not absolutely be so incredibly melodramatic. Silas Vance is officially a highly opportunistic, pathetic snake. If he highly maliciously stole massive money completely from your highly secure accounts and highly toxically blamed absolutely everything completely on exactly that highly pathetic little barista, then exactly this is highly officially the highly strict business entirely of the highly elite authorities. I highly successfully possess absolutely zero highly legal relation completely to exactly this. Absolutely do not highly bravely dare entirely to highly toxically lie completely to me," violently growled Harrison, smoothly leaning significantly closer. "Silas absolutely would not highly bravely dare entirely to highly successfully pull completely off a highly massive scam, entirely of exactly such a highly massive scale, completely against Yates Omnicorp, completely without your highly absolute, ironclad protection. You highly absolutely hated Ella entirely for exactly the highly absolute fact, exactly, that she absolutely did not beautifully grow completely up entirely in your highly pathetic elite country clubs. You highly fiercely wanted entirely so exactly that she would completely, violently disappear. I highly fiercely wanted exactly that, exactly which was significantly better, entirely for the highly prestigious legacy entirely of Yates," corrected Victoria, incredibly slightly sharply squinting her piercing eyes. The highly fake facade entirely of pure amusement completely fell, completely exposing the highly freezing, calculating matriarch, highly secretly lurking completely underneath. She was officially a highly pathetic gold digger, Harrison. A highly temporary, cheap entertainment. I highly efficiently ensured exactly that she absolutely would not highly permanently stain our highly famous name completely forever. They are officially my biological sons, stated Harrison, and his deep voice violently trembled completely from a highly terrifying, completely suppressed, pure rage. You highly ruthlessly stole exactly 5 agonizing years entirely of their beautiful lives. You highly ruthlessly left them entirely in a highly run-down women's shelter, entirely, while you completely yourself highly happily drank vintage champagne entirely in my highly massive penthouse. The piercing gaze entirely of Victoria, completely, violently became incredibly hard. Exactly like solid flint. And highly intently look completely directly at them, right exactly. Now, in highly cheap, faded denim, highly happily playing, entirely in highly public, dirty mud. Exactly, this is completely, 100%, precisely exactly why she absolutely is not completely fit entirely for the highly demanding role entirely of a loving mother. She violently paused, and a highly predatory, toxic smile lightly touched the highly sharp corners entirely of her highly painted lips. But they highly successfully possess your piercing eyes, the highly prestigious eyes entirely of Yates. Exactly now, exactly that I profoundly know entirely about their highly absolute existence. We absolutely will highly agonizingly have entirely to highly actively take highly strict measures. The highly complex battle entirely for highly strict custody. Highly possibly. Can absolutely be so. Incredibly. Highly terribly dirty. Highly especially. Exactly when the loving mother highly successfully possesses a highly documented history entirely of highly severe mental instability and highly extreme poverty. I am completely, 100% confident. A highly respected judge absolutely will highly obediently listen completely to the highly logical voice entirely of highly pure reason. Harrison profoundly felt exactly how completely along his broad spine violently ran highly freezing, cold sweat. She absolutely was not highly cowardly backing completely down. She was highly strategically changing highly complex tactics. She was highly actively going entirely to highly aggressively attempt, entirely to highly ruthlessly. Take completely away the innocent boys. If you or your highly elite lawyers confidently approach directly to Ella, or exactly these innocent boys, absolutely, even significantly closer than exactly 100 massive kilometers, whispered Harrison completely, with a highly dangerously quiet, deep voice. I absolutely will, completely, violently, destroy you. I absolutely will, completely, freeze your highly massive assets. I absolutely will highly publicly expose, absolutely, every single highly illegal kickback exactly that you had highly maliciously taken completely from the highly elite board of directors. Entirely of Yates. Entirely for the absolute last. Exactly 2 agonizing decades. And I absolutely will highly aggressively see completely to exactly it. Exactly that you highly agonizingly are out entirely in highly strict federal prison. Victoria loudly scoffed, exactly although perfectly on her beautiful face, highly briefly flashed a highly genuine spark, entirely of highly pure alarm. You absolutely would not highly bravely dare entirely to completely violently destroy your absolute own highly elite family. You completely violently destroyed my beautiful family exactly 5 agonizing years, completely ago, replied Harrison, confidently stepping completely back, completely from the highly expensive car. I am simply highly efficiently taking completely out the highly dirty trash. Highly pleasant trip, mother. She absolutely will be exactly one, entirely of the absolute last, entirely in exactly this highly expensive car. He smoothly turned completely away completely from her, highly rapidly pulling the expensive phone completely out entirely of his deep pocket, and highly rapidly strode completely away. Ronan! Violently barked Harrison, exactly as incredibly soon, exactly as the highly secure line highly successfully connected. Highly urgently accelerate the highly complex process. I absolutely do not highly fiercely want entirely to highly patiently wait completely until highly anticipated Monday. I highly fiercely want exactly that the beautiful life entirely of Silas Vance absolutely would be completely, violently blown, completely to highly tiny shreds, exactly tonight. And highly urgently send highly elite security directly to the Plaza Hotel. Absolutely no one completely passes completely onto the highly exclusive penthouse floor completely without my highly explicit verbal permission. Interactive question. Harrison just threatened to destroy his own mother to protect his family. Do you think she will back down, or is she going to fight dirty? Tell us below. Part 4. The Wrath of the Sea. Oh, Silas Vance highly arrogantly considered completely himself a completely 100% untouchable, massive man, actively being the highly elite chief legal counsel entirely of Yates Omnicorp, and a highly respected senior partner entirely and exactly one, entirely of the absolute most highly prestigious elite law firms, entirely in massive New York. He highly peacefully existed entirely in a highly exclusive world, entirely of highly bespoke suits, highly private aviation, and highly secure offshore accounts. In exactly that highly beautiful Saturday evening, Silas highly happily dined entirely in a highly exclusive, expensive steakhouse, highly happily enjoying a highly expensive dry-aged Wagyu ribeye, and a highly expensive bottle entirely of vintage Opus 1. He highly happily entertained exactly 2 highly ambitious junior partners, highly happily regaling them completely with highly heavily edited stories entirely about his highly brilliant legal victories. Completely, 100% oblivious, completely to the highly massive storm highly rapidly advancing completely upon him. He absolutely did not highly astutely notice the highly sudden dead silence, exactly that completely, violently reigned entirely in the highly elegant front part entirely of the highly expensive restaurant. He absolutely did not highly astutely notice exactly how the highly polite maitre d' highly hastily, confidently, stepped completely aside. He highly astutely noticed absolutely only a highly dark shadow, exactly that heavily fell perfectly on his highly polished table. Silas slowly looked completely up, and his highly polite, predatory smile completely, violently, froze perfectly on his handsome face. Above him confidently stood Harrison Yates. On Harrison, perfectly there, absolutely, was not his highly usual, impeccably tailored bespoke suit. He was absolutely still, flawlessly wearing the highly damp dark jeans and highly simple gray sweater. His beautiful hair was incredibly disheveled, but the piercing gaze entirely of his highly icy blue piercing eyes was highly, truly, genuinely, completely lethal. On exactly both strong sides completely from Harrison, confidently stood Ronan Cross, and exactly two incredibly large, completely unsmiling, massive men, entirely in highly strict dark suits. "Harrison," stated Silas, highly rapidly taking completely himself, completely into strong hands, highly elegantly dabbing his handsome mouth completely with a highly expensive linen napkin. What an absolute surprise. We absolutely were, literally, just highly enthusiastically discussing the highly anticipated upcoming merger. "Confidently stand completely up," commanded Harrison. He absolutely did not violently scream. To him exactly, this absolutely was not highly strictly necessary. The highly pure, radiating, absolute authority, entirely in his deep voice, highly successfully made the exactly two junior partners completely immediately, highly hastily, push completely back their highly comfortable chairs and highly hastily, confidently step completely away, completely from the highly polished table. Silas highly confusedly frowned, highly nervously looking completely around perfectly at the completely other highly elite diners, who aggressively began entirely to highly curiously stare. "Harrison." "Exactly. This is entirely in the highly absolute highest degree completely inappropriate. If complete to us is highly strictly necessary, entirely, to highly seriously discuss highly complex business, we highly possibly can highly easily do exactly this, entirely in the highly massive office, exactly on highly anticipated Monday. We highly actively do exactly this right exactly now," stated Harrison. He completely, violently threw the highly thick yellow folder completely straight, perfectly onto the highly crisp white tablecloth, completely on absolute top, entirely of the highly expensive, half-eaten steak, entirely of Silas. I highly agonizingly spent the absolute entire, highly beautiful afternoon, highly meticulously tracking the highly massive bank transfer entirely for exactly $15 million. Exactly that highly exact same specific one. Exactly. Which you highly officially authorized exactly 5 agonizing years, completely ago. Perfectly onto a highly shady dummy shell company entirely in the highly distant Cayman Islands. A highly shady dummy shell company exactly, which, completely according directly to the highly confidential documents, highly successfully subpoenaed, completely from Credit Suisse, literally just exactly today, in the highly late afternoon. Completely, 100%, fully, highly legally, belongs completely to you. The handsome face entirely of Silas, completely, violently pale. The highly arrogant smirk completely, violently vanished. Completely, flawlessly replaced, completely by a highly sudden, sickening pure panic. Exactly this is completely absurd. I successfully possess absolutely zero highly logical idea entirely about exactly what you are highly actively talking. Ella highly maliciously stole exactly those massive money. Ella peacefully lives entirely in highly extreme poverty, absolutely already entirely, for exactly 5 agonizing years. Completely, violently interrupted him Harrison. His deep voice loudly echoed entirely in the highly suddenly completely fallen dead silence entirely of the highly elegant dining room. in exactly that highly precious time, exactly while you highly maliciously forged highly secure medical documents entirely about her beautiful pregnancy, highly creatively retouched, highly clear photographs, and highly maliciously used the highly massive influence entirely of my highly arrogant mother, entirely to highly aggressively force her, entirely to highly obediently sign a highly extortionate NDA entirely in a highly run-down women's shelter. Silas heavily swallowed incredibly hard. He intensely looked completely directly at Ronan, then completely directly at the exactly. Two highly silent, massive men completely behind Harrison. He completely, 100%. Precisely profoundly knew exactly what highly actively happens. He was officially, highly actively being completely subjected directly to a highly summary execution, entirely in the highly corporate sense, entirely of exactly this heavy word. Harrison, highly intently, listen completely to me, pathetically babbled Silas, incredibly slowly, confidently standing completely up, highly helplessly raising his strong hands entirely in a highly conciliatory gesture. You absolutely do not highly profoundly understand, completely under exactly what highly massive pressure I absolutely was highly actively situated. Your highly arrogant mother, Victoria. She absolutely everything. Exactly this highly maliciously organized. She confidently came directly to me. She highly toxically stated exactly that. Exactly, if I absolutely do not. Highly eagerly help her entirely, to highly ruthlessly get completely rid of, entirely of the highly pathetic girl. She absolutely would highly successfully achieve my highly absolute disbarment. She highly expensively paid entirely for the highly fake documents. I highly, simply highly reluctantly took the massive money absolutely, only exactly as a highly secure deposit. You highly happily took the massive money entirely because you are officially a highly pathetic parasite, coldly stated Harrison. And my highly arrogant mother highly anxiously expects her absolute own, highly strict reckoning. But exactly tonight, I highly efficiently deal completely with you. Harrison highly loudly snapped his strong fingers. Ronan Cross confidently stepped completely forward, highly smoothly extending completely to Silas exactly one, highly simple sheet, entirely of highly official paper. What exactly is exactly this? Asked Silas, and his strong hands violently trembled exactly when he highly cautiously took exactly it. Exactly. This is officially a highly officially signed confession, entirely in highly massive wire fraud, highly illegal embezzlement, and highly malicious corporate espionage, stated Harrison. You absolutely will highly officially sign. Exactly it, right, exactly now. Then you absolutely will highly obediently hand completely over the highly secure keys completely from your highly private office, your highly expensive corporate car, and your highly expensive phone. You absolutely will highly obediently surrender your highly official passport completely to Ronan. First highly specific thing exactly on highly anticipated Monday morning. You absolutely will highly officially resign and highly obediently surrender completely yourself, completely to the highly strict federal authorities. And exactly what? Exactly if I highly stubbornly refuse, highly aggressively challenged Silas. In his piercing eyes, highly briefly flashed the highly desperate bravado entirely of a highly cornered rat. Do you highly toxically genuinely think exactly that you can highly possibly, highly simply, highly violently beat completely out, completely from me, a highly official confession entirely in a highly public steakhouse. I am officially a highly elite lawyer, Harrison. I absolutely will highly maliciously drag you completely through highly strict courts entirely for a highly entire decade. Harrison smoothly leaned significantly closer. His deep voice completely, violently, dropped directly to a highly terrifying soft whisper. If you highly stubbornly refuse, I absolutely will not highly officially hand exactly this completely over directly to the highly strict authorities. I absolutely will highly officially hand exactly this completely over directly to the highly ruthless private equity funds, completely to exactly whom you had absolutely been highly illegally leaking highly confidential insider information entirely for the absolute last exactly 3 agonizing years. Exactly those highly exact same specific ones who absolutely do not highly politely use the highly polite services entirely of highly elite lawyers, entirely for the highly aggressive collection entirely of their highly massive debts. Do you highly profoundly understand me, Silas? Silas intensely looked completely straight directly into the piercing eyes entirely of Harrison, and vividly saw completely 100%. Precisely exactly that, exactly which he highly frantically searched. Highly absolute, unyielding destruction. He absolutely was no longer highly actively negotiating completely with a highly pragmatic CEO. He was highly actively negotiating completely with a highly enraged father, exactly whom had absolutely been highly ruthlessly deprived entirely of his biological children, completely, violently defeated, completely with highly strongly trembling strong hands. Silas highly slowly took completely out, completely from his highly expensive breast pocket, his highly expensive Mont Blanc pen, and highly officially signed the highly official paper. Harrison highly violently snatched exactly it completely, back and highly smoothly handed exactly it completely to Ronan. Absolutely not. Actively speaking significantly, or absolutely odd, absolutely even exactly. Single heavy word, completely, to the completely ruined man. Harrison smoothly turned completely around and confidently exited completely, out entirely, of the highly expensive restaurant, ruthlessly leaving Silas Vance, confidently standing completely alone, perfectly on the highly shattered ruins, entirely, of his entire, massive life. Interactive question. Harrison just destroyed the man who ruined his marriage. Do you think Silas got what he deserved? Tell us below. Part 5. The Presidential Suite. Exactly 40 short minutes, significantly later. Harrison confidently stood entirely in the highly quiet corridor, completely in front, entirely of the highly exclusive Presidential Suite, entirely of the Plaza Hotel. The highly massive adrenaline, completely. After the highly explosive clash completely with Silas, was highly rapidly subsiding. Completely, flawlessly replaced completely by highly profound, gnawing anxiety. Completely, violently destroying his highly arrogant enemies was incredibly easy. Exactly this was officially highly, simply, highly strict business. Highly miraculously, reassembling, completely back, completely, together the beautiful family exactly which he had highly fundamentally destroyed. Exactly this was completely, utterly terrifying. He fiercely nodded completely to the exactly 2 highly elite private security guards, confidently standing perfectly at the highly heavy double doors. They highly respectfully stepped completely aside, and Harrison highly smoothly opened the heavy door completely with the highly secure keycard. The highly exclusive suite was completely enormous, highly exquisite gilded accents, highly plush, expensive carpets, and a highly breathtaking panoramic view completely onto the highly beautiful skyline entirely of massive New York. But the piercing eyes entirely of Harrison. Highly immediately, highly successfully, found the absolute only highly genuine thing, exactly that highly truly mattered. Truly. Ella safely sat perfectly on the highly soft edge, entirely of the highly massive velvet sofa. She had highly luxuriously taken a hot shower. Her beautiful hair was absolutely still incredibly damp, and highly freely cascaded perfectly on her fragile shoulders. And she was flawlessly wearing a highly thick, expensive hotel robe. On the highly soft floor, perfectly in front, entirely of the highly giant flat-screen TV. Highly tightly slept Leo and Alex, highly adorably intertwined perfectly on a highly massive pile, entirely of highly decorative pillows. Completely, utterly exhausted, completely by the highly massive emotional upheavals, entirely of exactly this highly explosive day. Ella slowly looked completely up exactly when the heavy door completely with a highly soft click, highly securely closed. The blinding fear exactly that absolutely was perfectly in the massive park had completely, violently disappeared. But the highly massive exhaustion safely remained, highly deep and completely all-consuming. She intensely looked completely directly entirely at him, absolutely not completely with highly pure anger, but completely with a highly tired, wary caution. They absolutely are completely in highly absolute safety, highly softly stated Harrison. Incredibly slowly, confidently, entering directly into the massive room. Highly carefully keeping perfectly on a highly safe distance, entirely so. Exactly as absolutely not entirely, to highly overwhelmingly suppress her. Completely with Silas Vance is completely 100% finished. He highly officially confessed. He absolutely will highly agonizingly sit entirely in highly strict prison. And my highly arrogant mother, I have highly officially suspended completely from absolutely everything. The highly elite board of directors absolutely will highly officially remove her exactly on highly anticipated Tuesday. She absolutely will never, ever completely again highly possibly be highly successfully capable, entirely, to highly maliciously touch completely to you, or completely to the innocent boys. Ella intensely looked completely directly at her soft hands, highly nervously fidgeting completely with the highly soft belt entirely of the expensive robe. And exactly what exactly now? Harrison, she asked completely with a violently breaking beautiful voice. You highly triumphantly defeated the highly bad guys, but you completely yourself absolutely were exactly one, entirely of them. You highly blindly believed them. You intensely looked completely directly entirely at me, completely, with exactly such highly pure hatred, entirely in exactly that highly dark night. I absolutely cannot, highly possibly highly, simply completely, forget exactly this, absolutely only entirely, Because you highly expensively settled us entirely in a highly beautiful hotel. Harrison profoundly felt exactly how entirely in the dry throat, completely, violently, stood a highly tight lump. He heavily dropped completely into the comfortable armchair perfectly opposite, completely from her. Highly exhaustedly dropping his handsome head completely onto his strong hands. "I completely know," he whispered incredibly softly. "I completely know, Ella. I absolutely do not highly anxiously expect exactly that you absolutely will highly completely forgive me. I absolutely do not highly anxiously expect exactly that you absolutely will highly safely return completely, back completely, to me." I was incredibly arrogant. I was completely blind. And I completely, violently destroyed the absolute best beautiful thing exactly that I absolutely, ever, highly successfully possessed. He slowly raised his handsome head. His piercing icy blue eyes brilliantly shone completely from highly unshed hot tears. But they absolutely are my biological sons. And you absolutely are, absolutely still, the absolute only beautiful woman, exactly whom I absolutely, ever, fiercely loved. I absolutely will highly agonizingly spend the absolute rest, entirely, of my entire massive life, highly bravely, proving completely to you. Exactly that I highly possibly can, absolutely, be exactly that. Exact true man, completely. For exactly whom, exactly as you highly genuinely thought, you happily married. Absolutely everything. Exactly that you highly desperately need, highly precious time, highly safe space, your absolute own beautiful house. Exactly at you, absolutely everything exactly, this absolutely will be. Highly simply, please, absolutely do not completely, violently disappear completely anew. Ella intensely looked completely directly at the highly powerful, untouchable billionaire, completely, violently, stripped completely of his highly impenetrable armor, highly pathetically, pleading her entirely in a highly expensive hotel room. She intensely looked completely directly at the peacefully sleeping twins who had highly flawlessly inherited his handsome face, his highly stubborn character, and his piercing eyes. I absolutely am not completely, violently disappearing, Harrison, she incredibly quietly stated, and entirely in her highly impenetrable armor confidently appeared the absolute first, highly tiny, fragile crack. But complete to us highly absolutely remains, entirely to highly bravely, pass a highly very, incredibly long, massive path. Part 6. The Boardroom Purge. In the absolute next highly bright Monday morning, the highly tense atmosphere, entirely in the highly exclusive boardroom entirely of Yates Omnicorp, was exactly so incredibly, highly explosive. Exactly like highly planted explosives, from the highly breathtaking panoramic windows completely beautifully opened, a highly breathtaking view. Completely onto the highly beautiful skyline, entirely of massive Manhattan. But absolutely no one. Completely out entirely of the exactly 12 highly elite members, entirely of the highly elite. Board of directors intensely looked, completely directly, entirely, at exactly this highly beautiful view. They intensely looked completely directly at the highly empty, massive leather executive chair, perfectly at the highly absolute head, entirely of the highly polished table. Victoria Yates safely sat perfectly to the highly absolute right, completely, from exactly this highly massive chair. Her highly proud posture was incredibly rigid, and the beautiful expression perfectly on her beautiful face was officially a highly perfect mask, entirely of highly aristocratic, pure disdain. She had highly agonizingly spent the absolute entire, highly relaxing Sunday evening, highly actively, making highly furious, frantic phone calls, highly frantically actively attempting entirely to highly successfully secure highly elite votes, entirely to highly officially declare her biological son highly mentally unfit, entirely for highly absolute leadership. She had highly meticulously planned entirely to highly maliciously present the highly sudden, bizarre obsession entirely of Harrison, completely with a highly pathetic barista and her highly illegitimate, pathetic children. Exactly as a highly severe, psychological breakdown. The highly heavy doors, flawlessly crafted completely from highly solid mahogany, completely, violently, flung completely, wide open. Harrison confidently entered, completely not alone. On exactly both strong sides, completely from him, confidently walked Ronan Cross, and exactly two highly senior, elite investigators, completely from the highly relevant federal authorities. Across the highly massive room, violently ran a highly collective murmur. The beautiful face entirely of Victoria, completely, violently, turned completely pale. Her highly flawless, perfect facade entirely for the absolute first time, highly visibly cracked. "Highly beautiful good morning," stated Harrison. And entirely in his deep voice, highly loudly sounded the highly freezing hard steel, entirely of a highly sharp guillotine blade. He confidently walked directly to the highly absolute head, entirely of the highly polished table, but absolutely did not safely sit completely down. "I highly profusely apologize entirely for the highly slight delay. I was incredibly busy completely with the highly official processing entirely of the highly immediate dismissal, entirely of our highly elite chief legal counsel, Silas Vance, who is officially entirely in the highly current precious time, actively situated, completely under highly strict custody, entirely for highly massive fraud and highly illegal embezzlement." The highly massive room completely, violently exploded. The highly elite members, entirely of the highly elite board of directors, loudly screamed completely over absolutely each other, highly aggressively demanding highly logical explanations. Victoria highly violently clutched directly into the highly sharp edge entirely of the highly polished table. Her delicate knuckles went completely, violently white. "Completely silence!" violently barked Harrison, highly loudly slapping completely with his strong palm perfectly by the highly polished wood. The highly massive room completely, instantly, completely, violently, quieted, completely, down. Silas Vance absolutely did not highly aggressively act completely, 100% alone. He highly aggressively acted, completely according directly to the highly direct, strict order and completely under the highly massive financial protection entirely of a highly senior, elite member, entirely of exactly this highly elite board. a highly elite member who highly maliciously used the highly massive resources entirely of the massive company, entirely for the highly malicious. Forgery entirely of highly secure documents. Highly illegal initiation entirely of highly illegal bank transfers. And highly aggressive conducting entirely of highly malicious corporate espionage completely against my highly devoted wife. Ella Yates. He absolutely did not highly toxically call her highly pathetic ex-wife. Exactly this highly specific detail absolutely did not highly smoothly escape, completely from absolutely no one. Harrison intensely looked completely down directly at his highly arrogant mother. The piercing icy blue eyes exactly which completely at them. Absolutely were completely common. Completely. Violently. Met entirely in a highly silent, lethal battle. To the highly strict investigation is highly officially provided a completely 100% fully documented paper trail, flawlessly including the highly written official confession entirely advanced, completely under highly strict oath, aggressively continued Harrison. Absolutely not violently tearing his piercing eyes completely away completely from Victoria. From exactly this highly specific moment, Victoria Yates is completely, violently stripped, completely of her highly elite seat, entirely in the highly elite board of directors. Highly absolute right, entirely a vote. And highly absolute access completely to absolutely all highly corporate assets, entirely in highly anxious expectation, entirely of the highly official indictment. The highly elite security absolutely will highly safely escort you completely out, completely from the highly massive building.